The fire crackled in the stone hearth, casting dancing shadows across the leather armchair, where Daniel Robert Hayes sat, his 97 years etched into every line of his weathered face. His hands, gnarled and spotted with age, rested on the worn armrests of the chair that had followed him from Wyoming to Montana 43 years ago. Those same hands had built fences, delivered calves, held dying wives, and cradled newborn children. Now they trembled slightly, as they always did in the evenings, a reminder that even the strongest hands eventually succumb to time. Across from him, James Daniel Hayes sat rigid on a wooden chair, 17 years old, and trying desperately to hide the fear that lived just beneath his skin. The draft notice crinkled in his shirt pocket. Report for duty, January 1944. 4 years of watching newsreels about Europe and the Pacific had not prepared him for the moment his own name appeared on that government paper. Great-grandpa, James said, his voice catching on the words. Everyone says you were brave in the Civil War, then building the ranch, but nobody tells the details. Could you tell me about when you were young? Daniel looked at the boy. Not a boy anymore, a young man about to go to war, just as Daniel himself had done 78 years earlier. The thought made something tighten in the old man's chest, a feeling he had learned long ago was grief mixed with helplessness. You're afraid, Daniel said. Not a question. James flinched, started to deny it, then nodded. The honesty of youth. I don't want to seem like a coward. Fear isn't cowardice. Cowardice is letting fear stop you from doing what's right. Daniel was quiet for a moment, watching the flames. You want to hear about the war? If you're willing to tell it. No, the old man's voice was firm. War doesn't teach you how to be brave. It only teaches you how to survive. If you want to learn about real courage. He paused, his eyes growing distant. Let me tell you about the bravest person I ever knew. James leaned forward. You mean great-grandma Grace? Yes. Daniel smiled, small and sad but genuine. The day I met her, I was 37 years old, been a widower for 14 months, had 5 motherless children and a ranch falling apart because I did not know how to be a parent alone. She saved you? No, Daniel shook his head. She taught me how to save myself, and that's a much harder thing. The old man settled back into his chair, closing his eyes. When he opened them again, they had traveled backward through the years. Winter of 1883, Wyoming Territory. I did something I'm not proud of. I placed an advertisement in the paper. Widower, 5 children, needs woman immediately. Not wife, not mother, just woman. And a 19-year-old girl answered. James sat forward. Why didn't you want a wife? Because I thought my heart died with Catherine. I thought whatever part of me knew how to love, how to hope, how to believe in good things, I thought it was buried with her. Daniel opened his eyes, looking straight at his great-grandson. I was wrong, but it took a whole year and a woman sold for $40 to teach me that. Sold, like cattle, by her own aunt who saw her as a burden. Daniel's voice hardened. $40 and a promise that her aunt would never have to see her face again. That was the value of Grace Eleanor Winters the day she stepped off that train at Rollins Station. James drew a sharp breath. That's horrible. Yes, but that's where the story begins, not where it ends. Daniel looked into the fire, his voice growing distant. Let me tell you, from the beginning, about the day I met the woman I thought was hired help, but turned out to be the one who saved my entire family. The flames flickered. Outside Montana, wind howled against the windows, and Daniel Robert Hayes began to speak. Grace Eleanor Winters pressed her palm against the frozen train window and watched her reflection disappear into the Wyoming snow. 19 years old, traded for $40 and a promise her aunt would never have to see her face again. The telegram in her pocket read simple words that had changed everything. Widower, 5 children, needs woman immediately. Room board $2 monthly. Not wife, not mother, just woman. Reply, Rollins Station, Hayes Ranch. Not wife, not mother, just woman. Like she was livestock. The train jerked to a halt and Grace's heart jerked with it. Rollins Station. End of the line. She didn't move. Couldn't move. Her fingers had gone numb hours ago, but that wasn't why she stayed frozen in her seat. Through the frost-covered window, she could see a man standing on the platform. Tall, broad, waiting for her. Miss, the conductor touched her shoulder. You need to get off now. I know, Grace's voice came out barely above a whisper. I know. She gathered her single carpet bag, everything she owned in this world, and forced her legs to carry her toward the door. Each step felt like walking toward her own hanging. The cold hit her like a fist when she stepped onto the platform. Wyoming winter wasn't like Missouri winter. This cold had teeth. It bit through her thin coat and settled into her bones like it meant to stay forever. The man approached. Up close, he was even larger than she'd thought. Dark hair streaked with gray at the temples. A face that looked like it had been carved from the same stone as the mountains behind him. Eyes so dark they seemed to swallow light. Grace Winters. Yes, sir. He looked her up and down once, quick, clinical, the way her aunt's new husband used to assess horses at auction. You're younger than I expected. I'm 19, sir, like the telegram said. Telegram said capable woman. You look like a strong wind would carry you off. Grace felt heat rise to her cheeks despite the cold. I'm stronger than I look, sir. You'd better be. He reached in for her bag. Name's Daniel Hayes. You'll call me Mr. Hayes. Yes, sir, Mr. Hayes. He turned and started walking without checking if she followed. Grace had no choice but to hurry after him, her boots slipping on the icy platform. A wagon waited at the end of the street. Two horses stamped and snorted their breath, making clouds in the frigid air. Daniel tossed her bag into the back and gestured toward the seat. Can you climb up yourself? Yes, sir. She could. She did. The wooden seat burned cold through her skirt, but she didn't complain. Complaining never helped. She'd learned that lesson long ago. Daniel climbed up beside her and took the reins. For a long moment, he just sat there staring ahead at the white-covered road that stretched toward the mountains. I need to make something clear, he said finally. You're here to cook, clean, and mind the children. Nothing more. You'll have your own room. I won't bother you, and you won't bother me. Understood? Understood. The children. He stopped. His jaw tightened. They've been through hell. Their mama died 14 months ago. They don't need complications. They don't need someone who's going to leave when things get hard. I ain't got anywhere else to go, Mr. Hayes. Something flickered in his dark eyes. Recognition, maybe, or just surprise that she'd spoken so plainly. Good, he said. Then we understand each other. He clicked his tongue and the horses started moving. They rode in silence for nearly an hour. The snow fell harder now, thick flakes that stuck to Grace's eyelashes and melted on her cheeks like tears. She refused to cry. How'd you end up in this situation? Daniel asked suddenly. Girl your age being sent off to a stranger. Grace kept her eyes on the white road ahead. My folks died when I was 12. Fever took them both in the same week. I went to live with my aunt, and she got remarried last spring. Her new husband didn't want another mouth to feed. Her voice stayed flat, steady. She'd had years to practice keeping the pain out of it. He saw your advertisement in the paper. Said it was the perfect solution to his problem. His problem, Daniel repeated. That's what you were. A problem. That's what I've always been, Mr. Hayes. Just a problem, looking for somewhere to land. Daniel was quiet for a long time after that. I didn't know then Daniel's older voice interrupted the memory that those words would haunt me for months. Just a problem looking for somewhere to land. How could a human being think so little of herself? The ranch appeared through the snow like a ghost. Dark shapes materializing from the white. A house, a barn, several smaller buildings Grace couldn't identify in the dim light. This is it, Daniel said unnecessarily. Before the wagon had fully stopped, the front door of the house burst open. A small figure came running through the snow. A boy, maybe 4 years old, his coat hanging open, his feet bare. Papa, Papa, you're back. Henry James Hayes. Daniel was off the wagon in an instant, scooping the child up and holding him against his chest. Where are your shoes? Where's your coat buttoned? You trying to freeze to death? I wanted to see you, Papa. The boy buried his face in his father's neck. I missed you. Something cracked in Grace's chest. The way this hard, stone-faced man softened when he held his son. The desperation in the child's voice. The 14 months of grief that hung over this place like a second winter. Who's that? The boy had spotted Grace still sitting on the wagon seat. His eyes went wide. Papa, who's that lady? Oh, this is Miss Grace. She's going to be staying with us, helping around the house. Is she our new mama? The question hung in the air like ice crystals. No, Daniel said firmly. She's not your mama. She's just here to help. Now let's get inside before you catch your death. Grace climbed down from the wagon, her legs stiff and aching. She followed Daniel toward the house, the little boy peering at her over his father's shoulder with curious eyes. The door opened again before they reached it. A girl this time, older, maybe 11, with dark hair and her father's sharp features. Papa? I told him to stay inside. Her voice was defensive, worried. He wouldn't listen. I know, Emma. It's all right. The girl's eyes found Grace and immediately hardened. Who's she? Mind your manners. This is Miss Grace. She's going to be helping us. We don't need help. Emma's chin lifted. We've been managing fine. Inside, Daniel said. His voice left no room for argument. The warmth of the house hit Grace like a wave. She stood just inside the door, dripping snow onto the wooden floor, and tried to take in her new reality. The main room was large but cluttered. Dishes stacked by a basin, laundry draped over chairs, toys scattered across the floor. A fire burned low in the hearth, barely giving enough heat, and there were children everywhere. Besides Emma and little Henry, Grace counted 3 more. A boy about 9 sitting at the table with a book. A girl perhaps 7 holding a doll and watching Grace with wide, wary eyes. And a baby 18 months sitting on a blanket by the fire chewing on a wooden block. 5 children. 5 motherless children in a house that had forgotten how to function. This is Benjamin, Daniel said, nodding toward the reading boy. He's 9, Rose there is 7, and the baby is Annie. She's nearly 2. She ain't a baby anymore, Papa, Emma corrected. She's walking and everything now. You've met Henry. He's 4, and Emma's 11. She's been running things since... Daniel stopped. His jaw worked. She's been helping. I've been doing everything, Emma muttered. Grace looked at the 11-year-old girl, this child who had clearly been carrying the weight of an entire household on her thin shoulders, and felt something shift inside her. That must have been hard, Grace said quietly, taking care of everyone. Emma's eyes snapped to her suspicious. I managed. I can see that. I ain't here to take over. I'm just here to help you. For a moment, something flickered in the girl's expression. Then it was gone, replaced by the same hard mask. We don't need your help, Emma said again, but this time it sounded less like a statement and more like a prayer. Daniel showed Grace to her room, a small space off the main area with a narrow bed, a chest and a wash basin, clean but bare, functional. This was... He stopped. Grace saw his hand tremble slightly as it rested on the doorframe. It's clean. There's extra blankets in the chest. Thank you, Mr. Hayes. He nodded once and left without another word. Grace sat on the edge of the bed and let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding since Missouri. Her hands were shaking. From cold or fear or exhaustion, she couldn't tell anymore. Through the thin walls, she could hear the family moving around. Daniel's low voice. Emma arguing about something. Henry chattering. The baby starting to fuss. This was her life now. These strangers. This cold house. This arrangement that felt more like a transaction than a beginning. $40. That's what she was worth. Grace pulled her mother's shawl from her bag and pressed it against her face, breathing in the scent that had long since faded. She didn't cry. She taught herself not to cry years ago, but she let herself grieve for just a moment, for the girl she used to be and the woman she was being forced to become. Then she stood up, straightened her dress, and walked out to face her new reality. The kitchen was chaos. Emma was trying to cook something on the stove, but whatever was in the pot had burned and was smoking. Benjamin had abandoned his book to attempt calming the crying baby. Henry was underfoot everywhere, asking questions nobody had time to answer. And Rose, the 7-year-old with the doll, had retreated to a corner, watching everything with eyes that seemed far too old for her face. I can't do everything, Emma's voice cracked with frustration. Benjamin, can't you make Annie stop crying? I'm trying. Try harder. Emma, I'm hungry, Henry whined. When's supper? When I finish cooking it, if everyone would just... Can I help? Everyone went still. Grace stood in the doorway, her hands clasped in front of her. I know my way around a kitchen, she continued. If you want, I can take over supper. You could rest a spell. Emma's grip tightened on the wooden spoon, her face flushed with something. Pride, maybe? or shame at being caught struggling. I said we don't need Emma. Grace's voice was gentle but firm. You've been carrying this family for 14 months. That's more than any grown woman should have to do, let alone a girl your age. I ain't trying to take your place. I'm just offering to carry some of the weight. The spoon trembled in Emma's hand. Mama used to say, the girl's voice cracked. She stopped, swallowed hard. That's a hard book, Grace said carefully. Your mama must have been real proud of how smart you all are. She was. Emma's voice was barely a whisper. She told us every day. The words hung in the air heavy with everything that had been lost. Grace worked in the kitchen while the children watched. She moved with quiet efficiency, scraping out the burned pot, finding ingredients in the sparse pantry, starting over from nothing. You know how to cook, Benjamin observed. He'd put down his book and was watching her with something like cautious interest. My mama taught me before she passed, said a woman who can feed people will never be truly alone. Our mama was the best cook, Henry announced. She made the best biscuits in the whole territory, that's what Papa says. I'm sure she did, sweetheart. Are you going to make biscuits? Not tonight, but maybe tomorrow if your papa's got flour enough. He does. Emma had settled at the table, and though her posture was still stiff, some of the fight had gone out of her eyes. Mama always kept plenty of flour. I've been trying to keep it stocked like she did. That's good thinking. Your mama raised a smart girl. Emma looked away quickly, but not before Grace saw the shine of tears she was fighting back. The back door opened and Daniel entered, stomping snow from his boots. He stopped when he saw Grace at the stove, his expression unreadable. Emma showed me where everything is, Grace said before he could ask. Supper should be ready in about half an hour. Daniel looked at Emma, who shrugged one shoulder. She asked if she could help. I let her. Something passed between father and daughter, a silent communication Grace couldn't read. Then Daniel nodded and went to hang up his coat. Supper was quiet but not uncomfortable. The children ate with the single-minded focus of people who were genuinely hungry. Grace noticed how Emma made sure everyone had food before taking any for herself. How Benjamin cut Henry's meat into small pieces without being asked. How Rose fed bits of bread to the baby while keeping one hand on her doll. They had learned to take care of each other because they had to, because there was no one else. This is good, Daniel said suddenly. He didn't look at Grace when he said it, just kept his eyes on his plate. Different from how he stopped, tried again. It's good. Thank you, Mr. Hayes. You put time in it. Yes, sir. Found some dried in the pantry. Catherine used. His hand tightened on his fork. My wife used time. The silence that followed was thick with grief. I can use different spices, Grace offered quietly. If it's too... No, Daniel's voice was rough. Don't change it. It's good to remember. After supper, Grace cleaned while Daniel put the younger children to bed. She could hear him in the back rooms, his deep voice soft as he settled each child. A story for Henry, a lullaby for Annie, quiet words for Rose that Grace couldn't make out. Benjamin and Emma stayed up doing something with a slate and chalk at the table. Lessons Grace realized. Their mother had started it and their father was keeping it going. You can read, Benjamin said suddenly. He was watching her with those sharp assessing eyes that reminded her so much of his father. I can. Most women out here can't. Not really. My mama thought it was important. She taught me herself. Our mama thought it was important too. Benjamin paused. She was teaching Emma to read from real books, not just primers. They were working through Pilgrim's Progress when He stopped. Emma's pencil went still on her slate. That's a hard book, Grace said carefully. Your mama must have been real proud of how smart you all are. She was. Emma's voice was barely a whisper. She told us every day. The words hung in the air, heavy with everything that had been lost. I could help with the lessons, Grace said. I mean, if you wanted. I know I ain't your mama, and I ain't trying to be, but I can read, and I know my numbers, and we don't need Emma. Benjamin's voice was quiet but firm. Maybe let her finish. Emma pressed her lips together, but didn't argue. I just mean, Grace continued, you've been doing everything for 14 months. Teaching the little ones cooking, cleaning, caring for the baby. That's too much for one person. Even the strongest person I know couldn't do all that alone forever. Who's the strongest person you know? A small voice came from the doorway. Henry stood there in his nightshirt clutching a worn stuffed horse. Henry, Emma said, Papa told you to go to sleep. I ain't tired. Who's the strongest person you know, Miss Grace? Grace knelt down so she was at eye level with the boy. My mama. She raised me all on her own after my daddy died. She never complained once. Worked from sunup to sundown and still found time to teach me to read and cook and sew. She paused. She used to say that strong people aren't the ones who never fall down. They're the ones who keep getting back up. Henry considered this with the seriousness of a 4-year-old contemplating great philosophy. My mama was strong too, he said finally. She got real sick, but she kept smiling at us. Even at the end, Papa said she was smiling when she went to heaven. Grace felt her throat tighten. She sounds like a wonderful mama. She was the best. Henry hugged his stuffed horse tighter. Are you going to stay, Miss Grace? The other lady didn't stay. Grace's eyes shot to Emma, who had gone pale. What other lady? Mrs. Blackwood from town, Benjamin said flatly. She came for 3 weeks after Mama died. Said we were too wild and too much trouble. Left in the middle of the night. We ain't wild, Henry protested. We're good, ain't we good? You're very good, Grace said firmly. Any fool can see that. Then why did she leave? The question cut straight through Grace's chest. This little boy asking why someone had abandoned him. Just like Grace had asked herself 1,000 times over the years. Sometimes, Grace said slowly, people leave because they're not strong enough to stay. It ain't about whether you're good or bad. It's about whether they have the strength to love you through the hard times. Are you strong enough? Grace looked at this small, earnest face. At the older children, watching her with guarded hope they were trying to hide. At this broken house full of broken hearts. I reckon we'll find out, she said. But I'll tell you this much. I ain't got anywhere else to go, and I ain't got anyone else who needs me. So I figure I might as well stay here and be needed by you. Promise, Henry held out his pinky finger. Grace looked at that tiny finger for a long moment. Making a promise to a child wasn't something to do lightly. Children remembered promises. Children counted on them. She hooked her pinky around his. Promise. She didn't know it then, the old Daniel's voice cut through the memory, but that promise became the foundation for everything that followed. Henry, your grandfather, he told me, years later, that was the moment he knew she would stay. Not because she wanted to, because she had promised. Later, after Henry had finally been coaxed back to bed, and Benjamin and Emma had finished their lessons and retreated to their rooms, Grace sat alone in the quiet kitchen. The fire had burned low. The house had settled into the creaks and sighs of an old building holding against the cold. Outside, the wind howled and snow continued to fall. Grace pulled the telegram from her pocket and read it again. Widower 5 children needs woman immediately. Not wife, not mother, just woman. She folded it carefully and put it away. Then she started looking for the flour tin. She found it on the 3rd shelf of the pantry, blue ceramic with flour painted in white letters. When she opened it, she found what she'd been hoping for, a sourdough starter carefully maintained. Someone had been feeding it, probably Emma. But there was something else. A piece of paper folded small tucked behind the crock. Grace's hands trembled as she unfolded it. The handwriting was feminine, careful, slightly shaky as if written by someone very weak. For whoever finds this, the note read, the sourdough starter is in the blue crock in the pantry. Feed it every 3 days with equal parts flour and water. The children love sourdough pancakes on Sunday mornings. It makes them smile. Sunday mornings are for sweet things. Don't forget. Catherine Hayes, July 1882. Grace read the words again and again. A woman who had known she was dying. A woman who had left notes around her kitchen, hoping someone would find them. Hoping someone would keep her family fed. Keep her children smiling. Keep the small traditions alive. Grace pressed the note against her heart and made a silent promise. Not to the children, but to the ghost of the woman who had loved them first. I'll take care of them, she thought. I'll learn what they need. I'll keep them smiling. She didn't know if she could. Didn't know if she was strong enough, good enough, capable enough. But she was going to try. The bedroom door opened and Grace quickly tucked the note away. Daniel stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "You're still up. Just finishing some cleaning, Mr. Hayes." He nodded but didn't leave. For a moment, he just stood there looking at her like he was trying to solve a puzzle. "Henry says you made a promise to stay." "I did." "You shouldn't have done that. He'll hold you to it." "I know. And if you leave anyway, if it gets too hard and you run off like the Blackwood woman." Daniel stopped, started again. "He'll be destroyed." Grace stood, met his dark eyes directly. "Then I'll be breaking my word to a child who's already had too much broken." "I know exactly what that means, Mr. Hayes. I ain't the kind of woman who makes promises she can't keep." Daniel studied her for a long moment. "Why'd you really come here?" he asked finally. "Pretty girl like you, young as you are. You could have found work somewhere easier. A shop in town, a hotel, something that didn't involve being stuck on a ranch in the middle of nowhere with a broken-down widower and 5 children. Because no one else wanted me." The words came out before Grace could stop them. Raw, honest. "Because I've spent 7 years being told I was worthless. Because my aunt's husband looked at me like I was dirt on his shoe and said I was lucky anyone would take me at all." She stopped, drew a breath. "Because when I read that telegram, I thought maybe I could be useful here. Maybe I could matter to someone. Even if it was just for cooking and homemaking, even if it was just being another pair of hands. It would be more than I was before." Her voice broke. "More than nothing." Daniel was quiet for a long time. "You're not nothing," he said finally. His voice was gruff, almost grudging. "Anyone who told you that was a damn fool." It was the kindest thing anyone had said to Grace in years. "Thank you, Mr. Hayes. Breakfast is at dawn. Don't be late." Then he was gone, disappearing into his room and closing the door behind him. Grace stood alone in the quiet house, surrounded by the sleeping breaths of 5 children and the howling wind and the ghost of a woman who had loved this family. Tomorrow she would learn the rhythms of this place, learn what each child needed, learn how to exist in this strange new life. But tonight she let herself feel something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope, small and fragile as a candle flame in a blizzard, but there nonetheless. She was here. She was needed. She had made a promise. And Grace Eleanor Winters was not the kind of woman who broke her promises. Dawn came with the sound of a baby crying. Grace was out of bed before her eyes were fully open, her feet hitting the cold floor, her body moving toward the sound before her mind caught up. She found Annie standing in her crib, face-red tears streaming down her cheeks. Wet diaper, empty belly, 14 months of waking up without a mother's arms. "Shh, little one. Shh." Grace lifted the baby and felt the heat radiating from her small body. "I got you. I got you now." "You're not supposed to touch her." Grace turned. Emma stood in the doorway, her dark hair tangled from sleep, her eyes hard. She was crying. "I always get her in the morning. That's my job." "I didn't mean to step on your toes, Emma. I just heard her." "And you heard her." Emma crossed the room and held out her arms. "Give her to me." Grace hesitated. The baby had stopped crying. Her small fist was curled around Grace's collar, holding tight. "Emma, I think she's—" "Give her to me." Grace handed Annie over. The moment she did, the baby started wailing again, reaching back toward Grace with desperate hands. Emma's face crumpled. Just for a second. Then the hard mask was back. "She doesn't know what she wants," Emma said, her voice tight. "She's just confused." "I'm sure that's all it is." But they both knew it wasn't. Over the next week, Grace discovered more notes. One tucked in the sewing basket, another folded inside a cookbook. Each one a small piece of wisdom about the children, the house, the routines that kept this family functioning. "Benjamin is afraid of the dark, but won't admit it. Leave a candle burning in the hallway at night. He'll never thank you for it, but he'll sleep better. Rose talks to her doll because she's afraid no one else will listen. Always stop and listen when the doll speaks. She's really talking to you." Emma pretends she doesn't need comfort, but she does. Sit with her after the others are asleep. She'll talk when she's ready. Grace followed each instruction, and slowly, day by day, the children began to open up. Rose started whispering directly to Grace instead of through her doll. Henry started asking Grace for stories at bedtime instead of demanding his father. Benjamin let her help with his reading, even pointing out when she mispronounced a word. And Emma. Fierce, protective Emma started teaching Grace the routines of the house, where things were kept, how the children liked their eggs, which horse was gentle enough for the little ones to pet. Mama called her Buttercup, Emma said one afternoon, stroking the old mare's nose. She's been here since before I was born. Papa says she's too old to ride now, but he can't bear to sell her. Some things are worth keeping, Grace said, even when they're not useful anymore. Emma looked at her sharply. Is that what you think we are? Something worth keeping? I think you're worth a whole lot more than keeping Emma Hayes. I think you're worth loving. Emma's eyes filled with tears. She turned away quickly, hiding her face against Buttercup's neck. Mama used to say that, she whispered, that exact thing. That night after the children were finally asleep, Grace found herself alone in the kitchen again. The work never really ended. There was always another dish to wash, another hole to mend, another floor to sweep. Emma emerged from her room around 9 o'clock. They sat together by the fire, saying nothing at first, just existing in the same space. Do you think Mama knew, oui, Emma asked finally, that she wasn't going to get better? Grace thought about the notes she'd been finding, the careful handwriting, the specific instructions. I think she knew. That's why she left all these notes. Emma pulled out the sourdough note, the one Grace had found first. I found this one 2 months after she died. I've been feeding the starter like she said. Even though, her voice broke, even though I didn't know if anyone would ever use it. You kept it alive for her. I kept it alive for us. Emma's voice cracked. I thought if I kept doing all the things she did, maybe it wouldn't hurt so much. Does it still hurt every day? Emma looked at Grace. But it hurts a little less when you're here. Grace reached out and squeezed the girl's hand. They sat like that for a long time, watching the fire burn low, saying nothing. The breaking point came on the 6th evening. Emma was trying to prepare supper alone, despite Grace's offers to help. Managing the stove, the baby, Henry's constant questions, Rose's needs. Annie was fussing, her gums sore from new teeth coming in. Something boiled over on the stove. Emma tried to catch it and dropped the pan. Gravy spilled across the floor, hot and steaming. I can't do it anymore. The words tore out of her raw and desperate. Her body shook with sobs she'd been holding for 14 months. I'm so tired. I'm so tired, and nobody sees how hard I'm trying. Grace moved toward her, but Emma backed away. I can't be Mama. I can't cook like her. I can't make everything okay. I can't. Grace wrapped her arms around Emma and the baby together. For a moment, Emma resisted, her body stiff with 14 months of learned self-reliance. Then she collapsed against Grace's shoulder and wept. I see, Grace whispered. I see how hard you've been trying, and I'm so proud of you. Your mama would be so proud of you. You didn't know her. I know what she left behind, and anyone who could raise a girl like you must have been something special. The other children appeared in the doorway, Henry and Rose with wide eyes, Benjamin standing protectively behind them. They had never seen their strong sister cry, not once in 14 months. Emma cried until there were no tears left. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were red and swollen, but something in them had changed. The hardness had cracked open, letting light through. I'm sorry, she said quietly. Don't be. You got nothing to be sorry for. The gravy's ruined now. Grace smiled. Gravy's easy to remake. People are harder. You needed to cry more than we needed, Gravy. They made supper together side by side at the stove, Emma teaching Grace where things were. Grace teaching Emma that it was okay to ask for help. When they finally sat down to eat, something miraculous happened. Emma smiled. For the first time in 14 months, the 11-year-old girl smiled. Emma's smiling. Henry bounced in his seat. Papa, Emma's smiling. Daniel looked at Grace with an expression she couldn't quite read. Gratitude, wonder, and something deeper. Something that made her pulse quicken. That evening, after the dishes were done and the children were tucked in, Daniel pulled Grace aside. What happened with Emma? She needed to cry. Emma doesn't cry. She does now. Grace met his eyes. She's been holding this family together with nothing but willpower and grief. That kind of strength has a cost, Mr. Hayes. She needed someone to tell her it was okay to let go. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Her mother used to do that, he said finally. Give people permission to feel things. Sounds like she was a good woman. She was the best woman I ever knew. His voice was rough, and I couldn't save her. Couldn't do a damn thing but hold her hand while she... He stopped. His jaw worked. I'm sorry, Grace said quietly. I can't imagine how hard that was. No, you can't. He turned away and left, disappearing into his room. Grace stood alone in the quiet kitchen. Outside, the wind had died down. The snow had stopped. Through the window, she could see stars beginning to appear in the clearing sky. She pulled out the notes she'd found. Read them again by firelight. Catherine's handwriting. Catherine's wisdom. Catherine's love, reaching across death to guide her family home. Thank you, Grace thought, for trusting that someone would come, for leaving these breadcrumbs, for loving them so fiercely that even death couldn't stop you from caring. She carefully folded the notes and put them away. Tomorrow there would be more work, more challenges, more moments of doubt and fear and uncertainty. But tonight, Grace Eleanor Winters allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she had found the place she was meant to be. Not because she was bought for $40, but because 5 children needed her. Because a grieving widower was slowly learning to see her as more than hired help. Because a dead woman's notes were teaching her how to love a family that wasn't hers by blood, but was becoming hers by choice. She banked the fire and headed to her small room. As she passed Emma's door, she heard a soft voice. Miss Grace. Grace stopped. Yes, sweetheart. Thank you for today, for letting me cry. You can cry anytime you need to, Emma. I'll be right here. A pause, then so quietly, Grace almost missed it. I'm glad you came. Grace's throat tightened. I'm glad I came too. She lay in her narrow bed that night and listened to the house breathe around her. 5 children sleeping. One man lying awake in the room where he'd once slept beside his wife. An old house creaking in the cold. And Grace Eleanor Winters, who had arrived as nothing more than a transaction, began to understand that she was becoming something else entirely. Something that mattered. Someone who belonged. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like coming home. The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm that felt almost like normalcy. Almost. But grief has a way of hiding in the corners of ordinary days, waiting to ambush you when you least expect it. Grace woke before dawn each morning, started the fire-ground coffee beans that Daniel had brought from town. Arbuckles pre-roasted, a luxury that Catherine had insisted on. Grace learned this from another note tucked inside the coffee tin itself. Good coffee makes hard mornings bearable. Don't skimp on this. It's worth the extra cost. The children like it sweetened with molasses on Sunday mornings. Make it special. Every note was a conversation with a ghost. Every instruction a reminder that Grace was walking in the footprints of a woman who had loved this family with a fierceness that transcended death itself. She found the 4th note on a Tuesday hidden in the medicine cabinet behind a jar of camphor. The handwriting was shakier than the others written when Catherine's strength was nearly gone. Benjamin is afraid of the dark, but won't admit it. Leave a candle burning in the hallway at night. He'll never thank you for it, but he'll sleep better. And when he has nightmares about his mother dying, don't tell him it's just a dream. Sit with him. Let him talk. Sometimes the dead need to be remembered out loud. That night, Grace did more than leave a candle burning. When she heard Benjamin cry out in his sleep, she went to him, found him sitting up in bed, tears streaming down his face, trying desperately to be quiet so he wouldn't wake Henry. She was there, he whispered when Grace sat beside him. Mama was there, and then she wasn't. She kept disappearing, and I kept trying to hold on, but she just went away. Tell me about her, Grace said softly. Tell me what you remember. And Benjamin talked about how his mother smelled like lavender and bread dough, how she used to let him read to her while she churned butter, how her hands were always moving, always creating something, how she sang hymns while she worked her voice clear and strong until the very end when it became a whisper. I'm afraid I'm going to forget, Benjamin said finally, what her voice sounded like, what her face looked like when she smiled. I'm only 9. What if I forget? Grace's heart broke. You won't forget. And even if some details fade, the important things stay. The way she made you feel, the things she taught you, the love she gave you, that doesn't disappear just because she's gone. Benjamin leaned against her shoulder. Do you think she knows that you're here, that you're taking care of us? I think she knows. I think that's why she left the notes. She was making sure you'd be cared for even after she couldn't do it herself. The boy was quiet for a long moment. Then, I'm glad it was you who came, not someone else. You. Grace had to fight back tears. I'm glad too, sweetheart. I'm glad too. Emma caught her coming out of the boys' room. The girl stood in the hallway, arms crossed, expression unreadable. He had a nightmare, Grace explained. I know. He has them most nights. I usually go to him. I heard him crying. I didn't mean to overstep. Emma was quiet for a moment. Then, you didn't overstep. I'm glad someone else can help sometimes. I'm tired of being the only one who knows what to do. It was the first time Emma had admitted her exhaustion without breaking down. Progress. We can take turns, Grace offered. You've been doing this alone long enough. Emma nodded, started to turn away, then stopped. Miss Grace, thank you for being the kind of person who gets up in the middle of the night for someone else's nightmare. He's not someone else's anymore, Grace said. None of you are. Daniel noticed the change in his children. How could he not? They smiled more, fought less. Rose was talking in full sentences now, her voice tentative but real. Henry had stopped waking up 3 times a night. Even Annie seemed calmer, more secure. And Emma looked like a child again instead of a tiny adult carrying the weight of the world. One evening after the children were in bed, Daniel found Grace mending socks by the fire. He stood in the doorway watching her for a long moment before speaking. You've been reading Catherine's notes. It wasn't a question. Grace looked up, meeting his eyes. I have. I hope that's all right. I couldn't look at them after she died. Couldn't bear to see her handwriting, knowing I'd never see her write again. He moved into the room, settling into the chair across from her. But you've been following them, haven't you? The things she left behind. Yes, sir. That's why Benjamin's sleeping better. Why Rose is talking more. Why Emma doesn't look like she's about to shatter into a million pieces. The notes help, but it's mostly the children themselves. They're strong, Mr. Hayes. Their mama raised them right. Daniel was quiet for a long time, staring into the fire. I've been failing them, he said finally. For 14 months, I've been so lost in my own grief that I couldn't see how much they were struggling. I kept thinking if I just worked hard enough, provided enough, they'd be all right. You haven't failed them. You're still here. You're still trying. Trying ain't it enough. Not when your children need you and you can't. He stopped, drew a ragged breath. Catherine was the heart of this family. Without her, we're just pieces that don't fit together anymore. Grace set down her mending. Then maybe it's time to build something new. Not replace what you had, but create something different. Something that honors her memory while making room for the future. I don't know how to do that. Neither do I, but maybe we can figure it out together. They sat in comfortable silence, the fire crackling between them. Outside, a wind was building. Grace could hear it whistling around the corners of the house. Storm coming, Daniel said, reading her thoughts. Big one by the feel of it. He was right. By morning, the temperature had dropped 20 degrees. The sky had turned the color of old pewter. The horses were restless in the barn, stamping and snorting. Daniel checked the barometer 3 times before breakfast. Pressure's dropping fast. We're in for a bad one. How bad? Grace asked. Bad enough that we need to bring the cattle closer. Stock extra wood. Fill every water barrel we've got. He looked out the window at the gathering clouds. Could be we'll be snowed in for days. He spent the morning preparing. Grace watched him work, noting the efficiency of his movements. Every action purposeful. No wasted effort. This was a man who had survived Wyoming winters before, who knew exactly what needed to be done and in what order. Benjamin, Daniel called, I need you to check the north fence line. Some posts were loose last week. Take a look, report back. But stay close to the fence. Don't wander. Storm's coming in. Be back in 1 hour. Benjamin straightened with pride, 9 years old and being trusted with real ranch work. Yes, sir. Grace felt something twist in her stomach. Maybe someone should go with him. Daniel shook his head. He's 9 years old, needs to learn responsibility. He'll be fine, he's done this before. Grace wanted to argue but held her tongue. This wasn't her place, not yet. Benjamin bundled up in his coat and headed out, a small figure against the vast white landscape. Grace watched him go, that feeling of unease growing stronger. The snow started at 2 o'clock, light flurries at first almost pretty. Within 30 minutes it had become a curtain of white so thick Grace could barely see the barn from the house window. Benjamin should be back by now, Emma said, her voice tight with worry. Daniel pulled on his coat. I'm going after him. I'm coming with you. Grace was already reaching for her shawl. You'll slow me down. I know this land better than you think. Emma showed me the paths. I know where the north fence is, and I know where a boy might shelter if he got caught in weather. Daniel hesitated only a moment. The wind was howling now, driving snow horizontal across the yard. Every second mattered. Get a horse. Now. They rode out into hell itself. The world had disappeared into white chaos. Wind screamed in Grace's ears. Snow stung her face like needles. She couldn't feel her hands within minutes, couldn't feel her feet. But she kept riding. Daniel shouted something, the wind tore away. Grace urged her horse closer. The old shepherd's cabin, she yelled. Half a mile past the fence line, Emma showed me. He knows not to go past the fence. He's 9 years old and scared. If he got disoriented, he might have wandered. Daniel's jaw set. He turned his horse and Grace followed, her heart hammering against her ribs. Please, she prayed to any god who might be listening. Please let him be there. Please let him be alive. The cabin materialized from the white like a ghost itself, dark, silent. The door half open, snow drifted inside. Daniel was off his horse before it stopped moving. Grace followed, her legs nearly buckling when she hit the ground. Inside the cabin, huddled in the corner, was Benjamin. His lips were blue, his skin waxy pale, his eyes glassy and unfocused. He was shivering so violently his teeth rattled. Papa, he whispered. Papa, I tried. I tried to come back, but I couldn't see, couldn't find the way. I thought I was going to... Shh. Daniel scooped his son into his arms and Grace saw tears streaming down the man's weathered face. I've got you. I've got you now. You're safe. We need to warm him, Grace said, already stripping off her coat. Fast. He's hypothermic. Daniel looked at her, really looked at her, seeing her perhaps for the first time not as hired help, but as a woman who had ridden into a blizzard to save his son. Wrap this around him, Grace said, thrusting her coat at Daniel. I'll use my body heat. You'll freeze. He'll die. Do it. They bundled Benjamin between them, Grace pressing her warmth against his small, shaking body. She could feel how cold he was, how close to the edge. Stay with us, Benjamin, she whispered. Stay awake. Talk to me. Tell me about your book. Tell me what happens to Robinson Crusoe. Benjamin's words came out slurred, confused, but he talked, and as long as he was talking, he was alive. The ride back was the longest of Grace's life. She rode behind Daniel and Benjamin, her body shaking with cold, her face numb, her hands barely able to hold the reins. But she didn't fall, didn't stop, kept going. When they burst through the door of the ranch house, Emma screamed. Is he alive? Daniel said. Barely. Get blankets, hot water bottles, everything warm you can find. The next hours blurred together. Grace worked with desperate efficiency, warming Benjamin slowly, carefully. Too fast and they could kill him. Too slow and hypothermia would take him anyway. She made him drink weak tea spoonful by spoonful, wrapped hot water bottles in cloth, and placed them against his core. Talked to him constantly, keeping him awake, keeping him fighting. Daniel never left his son's side. His hand gripped Benjamin so tight the boy's fingers went white. Not again, Grace heard him whisper. God, please, not again. Near midnight, Benjamin's eyes fluttered open, clear this time, aware. Miss Grace, I'm here, sweetheart. You came for me. You rode out in that storm. Of course I did. Mrs. Blackwood wouldn't have done that. She was scared of everything. Grace felt Daniel's eyes on her. Well, I ain't Mrs. Blackwood. No. Benjamin's hand found hers and squeezed weakly. You're ours. Across the bed, Daniel watched this exchange with an expression Grace couldn't quite read. But when Benjamin drifted back to sleep, Daniel reached across and covered Grace's hand with his own. Thank you, he said, his voice rough. Thank you for saving my son. I didn't do it alone. No, you didn't. His grip tightened. We make a good team, Grace. Miss Grace. She looked up at him. In the dim lamplight, something in his face had changed. The walls he'd built around himself had cracked. Just a little, but enough. Grace, she said softly. Just Grace. Grace. The way he said her honey made her heart skip, like it meant something more than it had before. They sat together through the night, hands joined over the sleeping boy, watching him breathe. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, something new and fragile began to grow. Benjamin recovered slowly over the next 3 days. Grace barely left his side, reading to him from Robinson Crusoe, with different voices for each character, making Long John Silver sound menacing and funny at the same time. The boy smiled more than she'd ever seen. On the third day, he was strong enough to sit up. You really came for me, he said, like he still couldn't quite believe it. Into that storm. You could have died. But I didn't, and neither did you. That's what matters. Mrs. Blackwood said she cared about us, but she would have stayed by the fire and let Papa go alone. Grace smoothed the hair back from his forehead. I'm not Mrs. Blackwood, Benjamin. I told you that. I know. His eyes, so much like his father's, looked into hers. You're better. You're real. But their relief was short-lived. On Sunday, as Benjamin was finally well enough to come to the table for meals, Rose collapsed. One moment she was playing with her doll by the fire. The next she was on the floor, her small body limp, her face flushed with fever. Rose, Emma dropped the plate she was holding. It shattered across the floor. Rose. Grace was there in seconds, her hand on the child's forehead. Burning hot, dangerously hot. How long has she been sick? She wasn't sick. Emma's voice climbed with panic. She was fine this morning. She ate breakfast, did her lessons. But Grace knew better. Children could hide illness, especially quiet ones, especially ones who didn't want to be a burden. Rose had probably been feeling poorly for days, saying nothing, because she'd learned that was what you did. You didn't complain. You didn't add to other people's troubles. Daniel, Grace called in, we need to cool her down, now. They worked through the night. Cold cloths, willow bark tea from the notes Catherine had left, careful monitoring. Rose's fever climbed higher and Grace felt fear clutching at her throat. This is scarlet fever, she said quietly to Daniel. There's an outbreak in town. Remember the Hendersons lost 2 children last month. Daniel's face went gray. No, not Rose, not. We're not losing her, Grace's voice was steel. We're going to fight this and we're going to win. But the next morning, Henry woke up burning with fever too. And by afternoon, baby Annie was hot to the touch, crying weakly, her small body struggling against the infection. 3 children, sick at once. And Grace had promised to keep them safe. I can't do this again, Daniel said, his voice breaking. I can't watch my children die. I can't. Grace grabbed his shoulders, forcing him to look at her. You won't have to. We're not losing them, any of them. But I need you here. I need you present. I need you strong. Can you do that? Daniel took a shuddering breath, nodded. What do you need? More willow bark, clean water. And I need Emma and Benjamin quarantined. If they get sick too, we'll have no one left to help. They set up beds in the main room, all 3 sick children where Grace could watch them constantly. Emma and Benjamin were sent to the barn with strict orders to stay away from the house. The vigil that followed tested every ounce of strength Grace possessed. She moved between the 3 children, cooling fevered skin, spooning medicine into unresponsive mouths, talking to them even when they couldn't hear. You're going to be all right, Rose. I know you're scared, but you're not alone. Henry, sweetheart, you're so brave. Just keep fighting. Annie, little one, I've got you. I've got you. Daniel helped where he could, but Grace could see the terror in his eyes. He'd watched his wife die of illness. Now he was watching it threaten his children. On the second night, Rose opened her eyes, fever bright but aware. Mama. Grace's heart cracked. No, sweetheart. It's Grace. Want Mama. Tears leaked from Rose's eyes. Please, want Mama. Grace smoothed the damp hair back from the child's burning forehead. I know you do. I know. But I'm here, and I'm going to take care of you just like your mama would have. I promise, promise. That word again, The word these children clung to like a lifeline. I promise, Rose. I promise I won't leave. Not ever. Rose's eyes drifted closed again, her small hand still holding tight to Grace's. By the third day, Grace was running on nothing but will and terror. She hadn't slept in 60 hours, had barely eaten, but she couldn't stop. Wouldn't stop. Grace, Daniel's hand on her shoulder made her jump. You need to rest. I can't. If I stop watching them, I'll watch them. Just for an hour, please. Grace looked at the three small bodies in their makeshift beds, all still breathing, all still fighting. 1 hour, she agreed, but sleep wouldn't come. She lay on her bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds from the main room. Daniel's low voice talking to the children, the creak of floorboards as he moved between them. After 30 minutes, she got up and went back. Daniel looked up when she entered. I told you to rest. I can't, not while they're... She moved to Rose's bedside, pressing her hand to the girl's forehead, and felt the change. The fever had broken. Rose's skin was still warm but no longer burning. Her breathing had deepened, become more natural. Daniel, Grace's voice shook. Daniel, check Henry. Daniel's hand flew to his son's head, his eyes widened. The fever's dropping. They checked Annie together. She too was cooling, her tiny body finally winning its battle against the infection. Thank God, Daniel's voice cracked. Thank God. He pulled Grace into his arms without thinking, holding her tight against his chest. She could feel his heart hammering, could feel the tremors running through his large frame. You saved them, he said into her hair. You saved all three of them. We saved them, together. He pulled back just enough to look at her face. His eyes were wet with tears he wasn't bothering to hide. Grace, He stopped, started again. I don't know how to say this. I don't have the words Catherine had. I'm not good at feelings. I'm not good at anything except work and silence and... Daniel, I'm falling in love with you. The words came out in a rush. God help me, I didn't want to. Didn't think I could. Thought that part of me died with Catherine. But you, the way you love my children, the way you fought for them, the way you see through all my walls like they're not even there. He cupped her face in his calloused hands. I love you, and I don't want to wait. I don't want to waste another day pretending this is just an arrangement. Marry me, Bang, not because we agreed to some transaction, but because I love you and I want you to be my wife. Really, my wife. Grace's breath caught. Daniel, we've only known each other 6 weeks, I know, and in those 6 weeks you've become essential to my life in ways I can't even explain. Please, say yes. Say you'll be mine. Grace thought about the girl who'd stepped off that train, worthless, unwanted, sold for $40. And she thought about the woman she'd become, the woman who'd ridden into a blizzard, who'd sat vigil over sick children, who'd earned the love of a broken family and helped piece them back together. Yes, she said. Yes, I'll marry you. Daniel kissed her then, soft and careful at first, like he was afraid she might break, then deeper with all the pent-up longing and fear and hope of the past 6 weeks. When they pulled apart, both were crying. Tomorrow, Daniel said. I want to marry you tomorrow. I don't care if it's proper or what people will say. I almost lost everything this week. I'm not waiting anymore. Tomorrow, Grace agreed. Behind them a small voice spoke. Does this mean Miss Grace is staying forever? They turned to find all 5 children awake and watching. Benjamin and Emma had snuck in from the barn. The 3 sick children were sitting up in their beds, weak but alive. She promised, Henry said solemnly. She pinky promised. Daniel laughed. Actually laughed. The sound was rusty from disuse but beautiful. Yes, she's staying forever and ever. The children erupted in cheers, weak from the sick ones but heartfelt from all. Even Emma was smiling through her tears. Forever and ever, Grace repeated, looking at this family that had become hers. Not because she'd been bought for $40, but because she'd chosen them, and they'd chosen her back. And that made all the difference in the world. The morning of the wedding, Grace woke before dawn to find Emma sitting on the edge of her bed. You're awake early, Grace said, sitting up. Couldn't sleep. Emma's hands twisted in her lap. Are you nervous? A little. Are you happy? Grace reached out and took the girl's hand. happier than I ever thought I could be. Emma was quiet for a moment. Then she stood and crossed to the door. Wait here. I have something for you. She returned carrying a bundle of white fabric carefully wrapped in tissue paper. Her hands trembled slightly as she held it out. This was Mama's wedding dress. She was about your size. I thought, if you wanted, you could wear it today. Grace's breath caught. Emma, I couldn't. That's your Mama's. I know. Emma's voice was steady despite the tears gathering in her eyes. That's why I want you to wear it. Mama would want Papa to be happy. She'd want him to have someone who loves him and loves us. And I think, her voice broke, I think she'd want that person to wear her dress, to be part of the family in every way. Grace stood and pulled the girl into a fierce embrace. Are you sure? I'm sure. Emma pulled back, wiping her eyes. Please, for Mama and for us. The dress fit perfectly. Simple white cotton with delicate lace trim at the collar and cuffs handmade by Catherine's own fingers. Emma helped Grace with the buttons up the barn, her young hands surprisingly steady. You look beautiful, Emma whispered, just like Mama did in the picture Papa keeps in his room. Grace looked at herself in the small mirror. She barely recognized the woman staring back. This wasn't the frightened girl who'd stepped off the train 6 weeks ago. This was someone who belonged, someone who mattered, someone who was loved. A knock at the door. Rose's small voice called through. Miss Grace, can I come in? Of course, sweetheart. Rose entered carrying wildflowers she'd somehow found despite the snow. Dried ones, Grace realized, from Catherine's collection that Emma had saved. For your hair, Rose said shyly. Mama always said brides should have flowers. Benjamin appeared next with his father's best handkerchief carefully washed and pressed. Something borrowed, he said solemnly. Henry burst in with a blue ribbon. Something blue, Emma said, you need something blue. Even baby Annie toddled in, clutching a small wooden cross that had hung in Catherine's room. Emma lifted her up so she could place it in Grace's hand. Something old, Emma said softly, from all of us. Grace looked at these 5 children, all watching her with hopeful eyes, her children now. Not by blood, but by choice, by love, by promises kept and trust earned. Thank you, she whispered. All of you. I promise I'll take care of this dress. I'll take care of all of you. We know, Benjamin said. That's why we're giving it to you. The church in Rollins Station was small and drafty, its white paint peeling from years of harsh weather. But to Grace, it looked like a cathedral. The whole town had turned out curious about the young woman who captured the widower's heart. Grace could feel their eyes on her as she walked down the aisle, but she didn't care what they thought. She only saw Daniel. He stood at the altar in his Sunday suit, his dark hair combed back, his eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her knees weak. When she reached him, he took her hands and she felt them trembling. You're wearing Catherine's dress, he whispered. Emma offered it. I hope that's all right. It's more than all right. His voice was thick. She would have been honored. The 5 children stood with them, not off to the side like traditional weddings, but right there at the altar. Benjamin and Henry on Daniel's Huibentia, Emma Rose and Annie on Grace's. All part of this moment, all part of this family being reborn. Reverend Morton began the ceremony, his voice echoing in the small church. Grace barely heard the words. She was too focused on Daniel's face, on the tears she saw gathering in his eyes, on the way his hands held hers like she was something precious. I, Daniel Robert Hayes, take you, Grace Eleanor Winters, to be my wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health. His voice broke on the next words, until death do us part. Grace knew he was thinking of Catherine, of vows made and kept until death tore them apart. She squeezed his hands, letting him know it was all right to remember, to grieve and love at the same time. I, Grace Eleanor Winters, take you, Daniel Robert Hayes, to be my husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part. Then Grace did something not in the traditional ceremony. She turned to the children, and I take your children as my own. Benjamin, Emma Rose, Henry, and Annie. I promise to love them, protect them, and care for them as if I had given birth to them myself. I promise to honor their mother's memory and to teach them about the woman who loved them first. I promise to be their Mama Grace today and every day until my last breath. A sob broke through the silence. Emma was crying openly, her arms tight around baby Annie. Benjamin had his hand over his mouth. Even Henry, who usually couldn't sit still for 5 minutes, stood perfectly frozen, tears streaming down his cheeks. Reverend Morton cleared his throat, clearly flustered. That's not in the standard vows. It's in mine, Grace said firmly. Daniel's hands tightened around hers. By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride. Daniel pulled Grace into his arms and kissed her with everything he had. The congregation cheered, the children whooped, and somewhere maybe a ghost named Catherine smiled. After the celebration, after the well wishes from townspeople, Grace barely knew. Daniel pulled her aside. There's somewhere I want to tell you before dark. They left the children with Emma, who was old enough now to manage for a few hours, and rode out to the north pasture. The snow had melted in patches, revealing brown grass underneath. Spring was coming, even if winter wasn't quite ready to let go. This is where we scattered Catherine's ashes, Daniel said, dismounting. She loved this field more than anywhere else on the ranch. In spring it fills up with wildflowers, blues and purples and yellows. Grace climbed down from her horse, her heart suddenly pounding. Why did you bring me here? Because I wanted you to meet her properly, and because I wanted her to meet you. They walked into the field together, the dead grass crunching under their boots. Daniel stopped at a particular spot and knelt, his hand pressing against the frozen ground. Hey, Catherine, he said softly. I brought someone to meet you. This is Grace. She's my wife now, our children's mother. His voice broke. She's kind and brave and strong, just like you were. She found all your notes, Kath. She's been following them, taking care of the kids the way you wanted, the way you would have. He was quiet for a moment, collecting himself. I know you wanted me to find someone. I know you told Rose that it would happen. I just wanted you to know. I didn't forget you. I could never forget you. But I learned that my heart's bigger than I thought. There's room for both of you in there. There always will be. Grace knelt beside him, placing her hand over his. Hello, Catherine. I wish I could have known you. Your children talk about you every day. They tell me stories about the things you used to do, the songs you used to sing. They miss you so much. She paused, gathering her courage. I promise I'll take care of them. I promise I'll love them the way you love them. I promise I'll keep your memory alive in this family forever. Grace looked at Daniel, then back at the ground. And I promise I'll love your husband, not instead of you, never instead of you, but alongside you, the way you wanted, the way you planned. The wind picked up swirling snow around them in a gentle spiral. Grace could almost imagine it was Catherine reaching out, embracing them both, giving her blessing. Come spring, Daniel said, I want to bring the children here. Have a picnic like we used to. Make flower crowns. Keep the tradition alive. I'd like that. And maybe we could plant something, a tree, something that will grow and come back every year, a way of honoring what we had while celebrating what we have now. Grace smiled through her tears. That's beautiful. They rode home as the sun began to set, the sky turning shades of gold and pink. When they arrived at the ranch, Grace felt a strange flutter in her stomach. She'd been feeling off for weeks now, tired in the mornings, queasy at odd times. Her monthly hadn't come. She needed to tell Daniel. Tonight, after they were alone. But as they approached the house, they saw an unfamiliar wagon in the yard. Emma met them at the door, her face pale. There's a woman here. She says she's Miss Grace's aunt. Grace's blood turned to ice. What? Judith Winters stood in the main room, looking older and thinner than Grace remembered. The children had gathered in a protective semicircle, watching the stranger with wary eyes. Grace, Judith said, you look well. What are you doing here? I came to take you home. This arrangement was never meant to be permanent. Grace felt Daniel move to stand beside her, his shoulder touching hers. A united front. This is my home now, Grace said firmly. Don't be foolish. You can't possibly intend to stay here. With strangers. With a man who bought you like cattle. Daniel's voice cut through the air like a blade. Ma'am, with all due respect, you gave up any say in Grace's life when you sold her to me for $40. Judith's face flushed. I didn't sell her. I merely— $40, Daniel repeated coldly. That's what you took. Don't come here pretending you care about what's proper. How dare you speak to me that way? I'm a respectable— You're a woman who threw away the best thing that ever happened to her. Grace is kind and brave and strong, and you treated her like garbage. Now she's mine. She's my wife, and I'm not letting you take her anywhere. Judith stared at them, something crumbling in her expression. Your wife— As of this morning, Grace said, we were married in the church, with all 5 children present. This is my family now. Judith's eyes swept over the children, over the house, over Grace and Catherine's wedding dress. Something in her face shifted. Grief, maybe, or regret. Harold is dead, Judith said abruptly. Died of fever 3 weeks ago. I'm alone now. I thought you might come back, that we could start over. Grace felt no satisfaction at the news. No grief either. Just a hollow sort of nothing. I'm sorry for your loss. Are you, Ba? I'm trying to be. Judith took a step forward. Grace, please. I made mistakes. I know I did. But Harold's gone now, and I'm alone, and I need you. You're my only family. I have a family now, 5 children who call me Mama. A man who loves me. A home where I'm wanted. Grace paused, then reached into her own pocket. She pulled out $40, the exact sum, Daniel's first payment to her, which she'd carefully saved. This is what you sold me for, Grace said, walking forward and pressing the money into Judith's hand. I'm giving it back. I found something worth more than money, worth more than anything. Judith stared at the bills, her hands trembling. I was wrong, she whispered. About everything. I told Harold you weren't worth the trouble, that you'd be a burden wherever you went. I was wrong. Yes, Grace said simply. You were. Can you ever forgive me? Grace looked at this woman who'd made her feel worthless for 7 years, who'd sold her like livestock, who'd convinced her she was nothing. And Grace realized she wasn't angry anymore. The woman standing before her was pathetic, alone, broken by her own choices. I forgive you, Grace said, not because you deserve it, but because I don't want to carry that anger anymore. I have too much good in my life now to waste space on bitterness. Judith's shoulders shook. Tears streamed down her weathered face. I don't deserve your kindness. No, you don't, but I'm giving it anyway. Grace gestured to the door. You should go. You're not welcome here. But I hope you find peace. I hope you find someone who loves you the way Daniel loves me. Judith nodded, clutching the $40. She walked to the door, then paused. You look happy, she said without turning around. Happier than I ever saw you. I am happy. For the first time in my life, I'm happy. Judith left without another word. They watched through the window as her wagon disappeared into the gathering dusk. Daniel wrapped his arms around Grace from behind. You didn't have to give her the money back. Yes, I did. I needed to close that door, to prove to myself that I'm not that girl anymore, the one who could be bought and sold. She turned in his arms. I'm Grace Hayes now, your wife, their mother, and I chose this. Nobody bought me. Nobody sold me. I chose. I love you, Daniel said, kissing her temple. God, I love you. Grace took a deep breath. There's something I need to tell you. I've been feeling strange for a few weeks now, tired, sick in the mornings, and my monthly hasn't come. Daniel went very still. What are you saying? I'm saying I think I'm pregnant, Daniel. I think we're going to have a baby. For a moment, he just stared at her. Then his face transformed. Wonder, disbelief all mixed together. A baby? His voice came out as a whisper. We're having a baby. I think so, yes. Daniel let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. He lifted Grace off her feet and spun her around, laughing like a child. A baby. We're having a baby. The children came running. What's happening? Mama Grace is having a baby, Daniel announced, setting her down gently. You're going to have a new brother or sister. The reaction was immediate and chaotic. Benjamin grinned. Emma burst into tears of joy. Henry started listing potential names. Rose hugged Grace's waist. Even Annie seemed to understand something wonderful was happening. This is the best day ever, Henry declared. Better than Christmas, better than pancakes, better than everything. That night after the children were finally asleep, Grace and Daniel sat together by the fire. His hand rested on her still flat stomach, and she could see the wonder in his eyes. I never thought I'd have this again, and he said. Another child, a new beginning with someone I love. Are you happy? Happy doesn't even begin to cover it. He pulled her close. You've given me everything, Grace. Everything I thought I'd lost forever. Hope, love, a future, and now a child. You gave me those things too. I was nothing when I came here. You made me someone. No, Daniel said firmly. You were always someone. We just helped you see it. Grace thought about that, about the journey from the train platform to this moment, from commodity to chosen, from worthless to invaluable. Thank you, she whispered, for seeing me when I couldn't see myself. Winter eventually gave way to spring. The field Daniel had shown her transformed into a riot of wildflowers just as he'd promised. Blues and purples and yellows stretching as far as the eye could see. They brought the children there on a warm May afternoon, all six of them now counting Grace's swelling belly. They spread blankets and ate the picnic Emma and Grace had prepared together. Sourdough bread, cold chicken, apple pie made from Catherine's recipe. Can we plant the tree today? Rose asked. The hope tree. Yes, Daniel said. That's why we brought the sapling. They'd chosen a young cottonwood, strong and healthy. The children took turns digging the hole, their small hands working alongside their parents' larger ones. Before we plant it, Grace said, I thought maybe everyone could put something in the hole, something to bury with the tree, to make it part of our family. Emma went first. She placed Catherine's wedding handkerchief in the hole, the same one she'd given Grace on the wedding day. So Mama's part of this too, she said. Benjamin added his copy of Robinson Crusoe. She gave me this book. I want her to know I still read. Rose placed a drawing she'd made. The whole family, including Grace and the baby bump. Henry put in his stuffed horse. So Mama can play in heaven. Annie dropped in a wildflower crushed in her chubby fist. Grace added her mother's shawl, the one she'd brought from Missouri, letting go of her past to embrace her future. Daniel pulled out the final note from Catherine, the one giving permission to love again. Thank you, Kath, he whispered, for everything. They covered the hole, patted the soil around the sapling, watered it from the creek. The tree stood barely 3 feet tall, but Daniel said it would grow, would become strong enough to weather any storm, would outlive them all. This tree will grow with our family, he told the children, roots deep, branches wide, a living reminder of where we've been and where we're going. Grace stood back, her hand on her belly, and watched her family work together. 5 children, 1 husband, 1 baby on the way, and the ghost of a woman who'd loved them first blessing every moment. The baby came in October, exactly 1 year after Catherine's death. A timing that felt both painful and perfect. Grace labored through the night with Emma by her side, the girl's competent hands helping in ways that made Grace's heart swell with pride. You're doing so well, Mama Grace, Emma murmured, wiping Grace's forehead with a cool cloth. Just a little more. When the baby finally came crying lustily in the gray dawn light, Grace looked down at her daughter and felt complete. She's perfect. Daniel breathed, tears streaming down his face. She's absolutely perfect. What should we name her? Grace asked. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then Catherine Hope Hayes. Catherine for the woman who loved this family first. Hope for what you brought with you through the snow. Grace's throat tightened. Are you sure? I'm sure she'd want to be remembered. And you gave us hope when we'd forgotten how to hope. The children met their new sister with reverence. Henry declared her the best baby ever. Rose promised to teach her everything. Benjamin calculated that she'd be old enough to read in approximately 4 years. Emma held her with the careful tenderness of someone who understood how precious life was. And baby Annie, now nearly 3, poked the infant's hand with 1 finger and giggled when the baby gripped it. Our baby, Annie said proudly. Our baby sister. That night, after everyone was finally asleep, Grace sat in the rocking chair with baby Catherine Hope in her arms. Daniel sat beside her, his hand resting on her shoulder. Do you remember the day you arrived? He asked softly. Every detail, the cold, the fear, the certainty that I was walking toward the end of my life instead of the beginning. I remember thinking you looked too fragile, that the wind would blow you away. Grace laughed quietly. I remember thinking you looked like you'd been carved from stone. I had been. Grief does that, hardens you, makes you think you'll never feel anything again. Daniel leaned down and kissed the top of her head. You melted that stone, Grace. You brought me back to life. You did the same for me. I was dead inside, Daniel, just going through the motions. You taught me I was worth loving. They sat in comfortable silence watching their daughter sleep. Outside, autumn wind rattled the windows, but inside all was warm and safe and right. I was sold for $40, Grace said finally, but I was chosen for forever, and that made all the difference in the world. The fire crackled in the Montana ranch house. Daniel Robert Hayes, 97 years old, opened his eyes and looked at his great-grandson. James sat forward on his chair, completely absorbed. What happened next after the baby was born? We lived, Daniel said simply. We raised our family. Benjamin became a doctor. Emma married a rancher and had 4 children of her own. Rose became a teacher. Henry took over the ranch when I got too old. Annie married a lawyer and moved to Helena. And baby Catherine Hope. Daniel's face softened. Your grandmother, she grew up strong and stubborn like both her mothers. Lived to be 73. Died just 5 years ago. And Grace lived to be 87. We had 68 years together, not enough, never enough, but more than I had any right to expect when I placed that advertisement in the paper. James was quiet for a moment, processing everything. You said you weren't going to tell me about being brave in war, but you did tell me about courage. Real courage, Daniel agreed. The kind that doesn't come from bullets and battles. The kind that comes from choosing to love when you've been taught you're not worth loving. From choosing to stay when every instinct says run. From choosing to build instead of breaking. Grace had that courage. Grace had more courage than anyone I ever knew. She was sold like cattle, told she was worthless, sent to a stranger who didn't even want a wife. And instead of letting that destroy her, she chose to transform it. To turn a transaction into a family. To turn $40 into forever. Daniel leaned forward, fixing his great-grandson with an intense stare. That's what I want you to understand, James. War is going to be hard, harder than you can imagine. You're going to be afraid. You're going to doubt yourself. You're going to wonder if you're strong enough. But courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is choosing to do what's right even when you're terrified. Choosing to love even when you might lose. Choosing to hope even when everything seems hopeless. Like Grace did. Like Grace did. She taught me that, taught all of us. Daniel's voice grew thick. When you're over there in whatever hell they send you to remember Grace, remember that strength isn't about never falling down. It's about getting back up every time, no matter what. James nodded, his eyes bright with unshed tears. I'll remember. Good. Daniel settled back in his chair. Now get out of here. Go spend time with your friends while you still can. Make memories. The war will come soon enough. James stood, then paused. Thank you, great-grandpa, for telling me the story. Thank you for listening. After the boy left, Daniel sat alone with the fire and his memories. Grace's face as it had been that first day on the train platform. Young and frightened and trying so hard to be brave. Her face on their wedding day glowing with joy. Her face as she held their daughter for the first time. Her face in their final years together, lined with age, but still beautiful to him. I miss you, he whispered to the empty room. Every day, I miss you. But she wasn't really gone. She lived on in their children, their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren, in the stories they told, in the lessons they'd learned, in the hope tree that still stood in that field, now a massive cottonwood with branches that could be seen for miles. Grace Eleanor Winters. Hayes had been sold for $40, but her legacy was worth more than all the gold in the world. And that, Daniel thought, as the fire burned low and his eyes grew heavy, that was the real story. Not about being bought and sold, but about being chosen, about choosing, about love transforming everything it touched, about hope that refused to die, about a woman who came in winter and brought spring with her, about forever.